Hey, and welcome back to Without a Doubt the podcast, a podcast where we celebrate living life authentically and organically as ourselves. We're the ones breaking cycles, making waves, and being the truest versions of ourselves. I'm your girl Mad, your host, and I'm a freelance entrepreneur. I'm a cycle breaker and a human being that has never exactly done what is expected of me. I'm also here to remind you that it's okay to live life different, that you don't have to be what is expected of you, and that your happiness, it matters. I think this episode has actually been on my list for a hot minute, but I just didn't feel like I had enough content, and I decided to do some crowdsourcing research and find some answers within this topic so that I could beef it up. First off, I really need to give some thanks. There are 6 of you that actually listen to this podcast before I get to listen to it on release morning, and it really actually tickles my soul. Also, the feedback has been so divine and super encouraging. Some of you even mentioned that you're loving the format, which I didn't really actually realize I was working through, but I want to let you know this episode is going to be laid out a little bit different, but you know I'll always leave you with something in your pocket or leave you with something to think about. I've heard some of these topics are actually some solid perspectives, and I hope you know that this feedback actually motivates me to get these out week by week. You sharing this podcast on your Instagram with your friends, copying the link to share with the girlie who needs to hear some of this shit is how I know I'm actually doing something right. So I thank you for sharing this podcast. There are people listening all over the world, including Africa and Asia, and I can't help but think it is super cool that I'm reaching those continents. So thank you. Let's get to the meat of this topic, being a woman, which I do love. I find it to be the golden superpower. Like, I love being a woman. I would not want to be a man. We have the ability to shapeshift into being soft and delicate, or you can be a hard-ass, bitchy broad. I think this really allows me as a person to get creative. But of course, there are downsides to being a woman, and there are things that we hate about being a woman. Like I mentioned before, I did do a little bit of crowdsourcing, and some of these responses I'm going to share are not all mine. But some of these are answers from Instagram and other forums where I went to find other women who could help your girl out. I hate getting my car serviced, which actually led to the thought of this podcast episode. I hate going into the car dealership or right into, let's even say, Tire Kingdom or something like that. And I just feel like right away, maybe it's my thought process, but because they know more, I feel a lot of times they want to take advantage. And I've heard this a lot through a lot of women too, that just going to get your car serviced seems like such a hassle as a woman. You don't feel trustworthy of that technician. There's other things like maybe doing things alone at night, walking through construction sites, or anywhere more or less alone, I guess. Going for runs alone. I just said walking alone, but going for runs by myself. Asking men for help, especially them for help. Cue the mansplaining, no thank you. I asked Instagram, both on my podcast page and on my personal IG, and some of the answers I got back were seriously just about what we women have to deal with in general with our body. Periods, wearing bras, shopping for clothes, shaving, and the beauty standards that we either adhere to or are supposed to live up to, such as like shaving, hair and skin treatments, or nail things, blah, blah, blah. But for some reason, no one really answered my questions or mentioned that women have unfair work wages, we have threats to our reproductive rights, women's rights, unequal political representation, and human trafficking. Did you know also that according to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, the human trafficking data collection activities report states that 92% of defendants charged with slavery, forced labor, sex trafficking were male. 92% of these predators were male. But in 2023, there are more reports saying that there are a lot of boys and men also being pulled into this trade. So I think this is very relatable to both genders. So when we talk human trafficking, that is a whole topic on its own. And I think we've all seen the movie Taken. So that's what I think about. That girl essentially is taken into the human trafficking ring. But those are things I think a lot of women think about, just our safety in general. But when we talk about women's rights and things like that, we're maybe even talking about the new 6-week abortion ban. We live here in South Florida, and there are things like that going on. The passing of new legislature to strip us of women's rights and reproductive decisions of our own bodies. Why are women always told what we can and cannot do with our own body? Last I checked, we carry children, we bleed monthly, and we do far more than the average man. This is not a bashing episode of men, so if you are here and you are a man, thank you for listening, and I hope maybe this brings you a fresh perspective in the women's world. According to the Center for Reproductive Rights, 40% of women live under restrictive laws, which represents over 750 million of reproductive age. That's like worldwide, right? 6% of women live in countries where abortions are completely prohibited. And I think any woman who has a mind or a body, which is all women, know what is best for our bodies. We know what we want for them. And these abortion bans and restrictive rules around what women's reproductive rights, they take away the ideas that we have control of them. It's our body. And now you're telling us we can or cannot do things. Because if we're unable to have medical procedures or we need help in specific times, like abortions, we don't have the choices to do what we need or can't do. I do have a podcast episode, by the way, about being child-free, and my guest co-host talks about getting her tubes tied. So catch up on that if that's a topic that sounds interesting to you. But just talking about women's reproductive rights, that's a whole nother topic. That's like a whole rabbit hole, right? There's things forever. But as a woman, there's also gender-based violence. Human Rights Campaign says, in quote, gender-based violence refers to an act that causes physical, sexual, or psychological harm or suffering to women. According to experts, over 1/3 of women and girls experience some kind of violence during their lifetime. The risk increases during conflicts, natural disasters, and emergencies. Intimate partner violence is actually the most common form of gender-based violence, and that happens to 1 in 4 women. And they experience that with physical or sexual violence from just an intimate partner. Anybody can experience this, women, men, young, old, refugees, ethnic minorities, LGBT, but women and all of these other minority categories are truly the most vulnerable. Maybe you're even thinking of a time that you might have felt in harm as a woman being in presence of a man or a partner or just something. I know in my teens, there's been moments where I was unsafe with boys, and luckily I got out of those things and I did what I had to do to get out of those situations, but things have happened to me too as a woman. Let's talk about women in politics. The UN estimates that it will take over 130 years for the world to reach gender equality in the highest positions of power. I don't know about you, but that sounds so sad. We have women in power and women taking roles, advocating not only for women, but other groups that aren't even represented, like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She's only 34 years old, by the way. We've seen Kamala Harris, Michelle Obama, RBG, and other women step up to the plate. But they are it's a very, very small percentage compared to the male counterparts. We are not represented in the White House. We're not represented in political parties. We are not represented in the government. And I think that's really sad. And I think that's where our women's reproductive rights and all of those things go hand in hand. I know I'm just touching the surface level of all these things, but I just wanted to talk about things about women and why maybe it's a little unfair. Women in the workplace, according to one.org, says 70% of health and social care workers are women. 70%. Women are the first responders during most crises, but this work isn't always valued. In fact, 50% of women's work in health and social care actually goes unpaid and unrecognized. We all know a boss-ass bitch who crushes their role at work. When we think of women in the workplace, we think of them at hospitals, schools, other feminine positions. That's just how society has played gender roles in the women's world. But I love when I see a girl as a mechanic, a welder, an electrician, they've got a trade, or maybe one of those male gender-based roles in work. Women truly can do anything, including using power tools and fixing shit. I also have had someone mention to me that they had to nice themselves up with men in order to get respect, or change their voice in order to stand out. Or I've actually heard other women and listen to podcasts where women say in showbiz, they've changed their voice, and their reasoning was so they could gain attention from men, so they could find success within the Hollywood world. In the workplace, women are not usually put up as the lead, the CEO, the first in command, without them giving some push and probably a fuck ton of work. Men usually will get that seat just a lot quicker because men are given that respect just because of their gender. Women, on the other hand, we have to work for respect because of our gender. Pay is also very unfair for women. Let's talk about women's sports. This is honestly the best example I've got. According to Forbes, the Women's World Cup prize pool totals $110 million last year in 2023 compared to $30 million in 2019. Now that was just 4 years ago. The pay increase went up literally by almost 100,000, right? So this pay increase is largely due to the efforts of the women's soccer team and their counterparts working around the world to highlight this huge gender gap in the sport and to demand equal pay. despite the considerable increase, the money allocated for the women's team lags far behind because the men's World Cup is $440 million. Yes, $110 million for the women's, $440 million for the guys. Why did they get more? Let's talk about Caitlin Clark and her pay. According to Business Insider, the Indiana Fever selected Caitlin Clark as the #1 pick in this 2024 WNBA draft. Her 4-year contract is a worth base of $338,000, and it'll pay about $76,000 a year. Yes, I did just say $76,000 a year. Now, the minimum salary for an NBA male player in 2023 and 2024 is over $1.1 million. The average salary is $9 million for a guy in the NBA. Caitlin Clark didn't even get $100,000 in her first season, where a man is getting easily 10 times the amount of pay to play the same exact sport. Why is that? I've seen reports saying that the WNBA actually loses money on games because there's not enough fans or merchandise or things like that, and I feel like this is kind of partly BS. Women's sports are rarely aired on TV. Better yet, they're not on prime times, or they're not on channels that a lot of people even get. How is anyone going to get access to these games if they're not aired? You put Monday Night Football or basketball at 7 p.m. Literally, it takes over other channels' programming times. We don't do that with women's sports. It never really gives the world a chance to see it, so people never really get a chance to watch women's sports. These are just sports examples, but this is a case in a lot of careers. Women have to constantly fight and advocate for themselves in order to have better wages. Why is it that just 4 years ago, the women's soccer team was getting $30 million, but the men have been crushing in the 400,000s for all these years? It's just super unfair. Now let's talk about our body and the things that we have to deal with. We have a period, we can grow a baby, and honestly, I love being a woman. I find that we are the goddesses in each of our own bodies. We hold a power that only women have. Only us women hold this power, and that is to give life. Sure enough, we do need the male counterpart, but I think with medicine in this technology time, maybe not. We do unimaginable things with our bodies, and we are expected to continue on the norm despite dealing with 5 days of bleeding or 9 months carrying a growing child in your womb. We have a sense of nurture and softness, all while able to become the wrath of all. We are a miracle gender. Some responses about being a woman that most mentioned in my poll were the beauty standards, like getting your hair and nails done, shaving, wearing a bra, and I think these standards maybe are standards that we hold ourselves to as a woman. I did see a fact that in 1920s, shaving became like a thing for consumerism, and that's true, right? More beauty, women can shave their hair, they can make money off of selling razors and shaving cream and lotions, all catered to women. A lot of things are due to consumerism. So I think, like, when you think about that, what is the purpose of us shaving? Maybe you've grown out your armpit hairs and that's for you, great. I do know some women who don't shave, like not even their armpits at all, and that's badass. You do you, baby. Boom. You don't have to shave. You also don't have to get your hair and nails done. But I do think that going to get those things done should feel like a treat and not a chore. I do have a love-hate relationship with getting my nails done, as I do like to do my own. I feel like it's very therapeutic, but I understand the whole financials of looking pretty. It can be really expensive to get your nails done, especially now. It's like $100 for gel nails and a pedicure. No? The standards of beauty that women have adhered to or followed were most likely made by a man, like I said, but you don't have to color your hair and you don't have to do your nails and you don't need all of the expensive treatments. You most likely do them for yourself to feel better or to feel more presentable to the world. I do 100% believe that getting your haircut and nails done, once again, are things that we do for our own self-confidence and how we show face to the world. That's why we do them. This is kind of just like wearing a bra. Why does everyone complain about wearing a bra? You don't have to. Let them hang and do their thing. But like I said, being supported and wearing a bra out, that's on you. I have saggy boobs. I like to wear a bra. I have saggy boobs from weight loss, so it happens. I need the support. But I do know that my mom and my aunt are usually braless most of the time, and I am all for it. You do not have to support the girls. You choose to. Also, if you're wearing bras that are uncomfortable, you can go on Google and try something new. We're loaded with options these days. They even make bras catered to the little titty committee. The itty bitty titty committee. Life is too short to be uncomfortable. Go get a new fucking bra. If we're complaining about bleeding out once a month, I agree, it does suck. But it's your superpower. We didn't get to choose having a period. Sorry. It was given to us through gender. However, if we're always bitching about our periods, it's time to lean into loving this time of the month. Use it as rest, recharge, and a refresh. Use it as a fucking excuse to veg out. Or just use the period days to harness your truest woman power. We're a part of an exclusive club. Lucky us. And the last two things I'm going to talk about is our attitude and women's safety. So often men tell us to smile, but I think a lot of us times, women, we're walking around with this RBF, with that resting bitch face and a serious face in order to protect ourselves. We get catcalled a lot while we're out, maybe even followed or stared at. I was once out for a run and followed by a man in a car. He turned down multiple streets with me and I could see him driving slow. I ended up going through a park so that he couldn't drive that way and I could escape his view. That actually freaked me out. And we often hear about women running and being kidnapped or whatever, human trafficked. How we need to wear pepper spray in our vests for a run, or how we need to take self-defense classes. Some women even run with a gun at this point, like they make leggings for guns. We seek safety for ourselves because being a woman and being out alone has us on high alert. They even created a special shot at the bar in case we're on a bad date, which can help any woman out of an unsafe situation, which I guess is no longer secret since social media kind of blew that up. We also have ideas of what a woman walks and talks and looks like. We aren't all going to be Marilyn Monroe. We are not all sex pots. We have value. We hold space. We represent an entire population of strength and resilience. Women were not only meant to be homemakers and housewives. We weren't meant to stand down and be quiet. And I want to end this episode with a story about Joan of Arc. And maybe you've heard of her. And if you haven't, this should be a good little history lesson for you and a reminder about being a woman. Joan of Arc, often referred to as the Maid of New Orleans, I don't know, I never say that right, was a remarkable figure in the French history, and she was a symbol of bravery, determination, and conviction. She was born about 1412 in France, and she was a daughter of a farmer, which apparently is a myth. They say she really wasn't a peasant, but she was growing up during the time of the 100 Years' War between France and England. From a young age, she felt like she had visions and heard voices, which she believed were messages from God. And at the age of 17, she actually received a divine calling. That was the heir to the French throne, reclaim his rightful place as king, and drive the English out of France. Inspired by her visions and guided by her unwavering faith, Joan set off on her extraordinary journey. But then in 1942, she convinced the skeptical Dauphin, which is Charles VII, to allow her to lead an army against the English. Remember, she is from France. She was dressed in armor, wielding a sword, and displayed exceptional military prowess and strategic acumen, leading her troops to several significant victories, which was later also debunked and said that she really never fought in the war. But she did dress like a man in order to get better recognition. And one of her most notable achievements was when the lifting of the siege of New Orleans. That was a turning point in the war. Her success of the battlefield and her unshakable belief in the divine mission actually earned her admiration and respect among the French people. She became an icon to the French people and a symbol of hope and rallying point for the fractured nation for 100 years. Remember, they were basically under war. This was also in the 1400s, so they had a lot of challenges, opposition from church officials and political rivals, but Joan always was resolute and focused on her goal, and that was that she had a vision to do more for the future. Her journey actually came to a tragic end, and she was actually burned to the stake after she was captured and faced a series of trials and tribulations while she was accused of cross-dressing and witchcraft. And she actually only died at 19 years old. But Joan of Arc did not end the story did not end when she was burned at the stake and with her execution. In the years following her death, her reputation actually got bigger and grew. She was eventually exonerated of the charges against her. She was canonized as a saint in the Catholic Church in the 1900s, and she continues to be regarded as a national heroine, I don't know, in France, and as an inspirational figure worldwide. You've probably heard of Joan of Arc, and her legacy extends beyond her military successes. She challenged gender roles in medieval society, and that was in the 1400s, defying societal expectations by leading an army. She was a symbol of patriotism, courage, devotion, reminding people that even in the face of great adversity, one person's determination and faith can actually make a difference. However, like I said, they said she didn't actually fight in the war, but she served as maybe a spiritual inspiration and an advisor to the French army, and that's what actually led them into victory during the 100 Years' War. She was also only 17 years old when she led the French army, and this story is one of those stories that's retold over time and over time and over time, and I actually just relearned it now as I did some research for this podcast. They say Joan of Arc remains an enduring inspiration for those who strive to stand up for their beliefs and fight for a better world. Do you remember what it was like to be 17 years old, a 17-year-old woman? The power that I harnessed then, man, I thought I was stone unbreakable, and I felt like I was the Joan of Arc. I had that kind of faith. We all harness that unbreakable power because we are women. I think so often we are felt at a disadvantage in life because we are women, but life is impossible without us. We are the life. So on the days you feel like being a woman sucks, I hope you harness that Joan of Arc persona and keep the faith, because you've got this, girlie. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I think I say that at the end of every single episode, but I really do. My intention is always to leave you with something that you can think about. Pocket this for later or have something for the taking. I couldn't do this podcast without you. And don't you forget that you are without a doubt a badass. Coming later this month, and maybe just the first week of June, I will be talking about my fativersary, how I lost 75 pounds in 1 year, and I'm going to spill the tea on my 14 years of my own fitness journey. I'll see you soon. XOXO, your girl, Mad. Bye.